Okay, so we're here revisiting this question from about 3 years ago. I worked on it, 2017, and I did a worked question where it was building a linked list of student emails and student details, and we did add and delete and display. And I've just had a request through this week. Any code for edit data? I'm still confused. Okay, so especially for you, Novand, I'll do the edit, and I hope this is clear for you. So if anybody wants any functionality added to this example, please let me know. And if there's anything you're not happy with, please let me know as well. Don't just click the dislike button. Please tell me why. and I'd also appreciate it if you gave me the chance to fix anything you're not happy with. So don't click the dislike. Leave a comment and say, can you fix this? And give me a week or two to fix it. And then decide whether you want to click the like or dislike. Just don't reach for the dislike button and click it. Please don't do that. That's really makes me sad. Okay, so let's now look at our code again, and we'll look at adding an edit function so that we can edit the student data that's already been added. Okay, so let's do that. So let's start by going through the code where we left it. Okay, so this is the student email class. This is a class that contains the functionality to store just a single student's details. So we've got a name and an ID. Okay, student ID and student name, that's all we've got. And then we use the common thing for at my.email to append onto their student ID to generate their email address automatically. Okay, so we've got a default constructor, just sets name and ID to blank. And then we've got a parameterized constructor, which takes in a name and an ID and trims them. And if the length equals to 0, we throw an exception to get an error. And if the ID length is 0, throw an exception so that our GUI class can handle the exception. Okay, that was all stuff we did in the prior example. And otherwise, we can set the class data to the values passed in. So this.name, in other words, the class field name, equals the value of name that was passed in. So this is the value that was passed in. Okay, so that's that chap there. And this.name is the class field. Okay, so we're just doing a recap here. So that's that one. Okay. And we've got get name and get ID, so accessor methods. And then we've got set name and set ID. So they're our mutator methods. They should, if this is a real application, these would also be enforcing the rule that the length cannot be 0. Okay, so we need to maybe add some code in here to make sure that these aren't being set to blank fields or blank values. That's something we could add in later. And our toString method just returns the ID plus the name plus the ID plus the email stub, okay, which is our s123 at my.email or whatever. So it's building an email from their ID and the email sub, which is that constant up here. Okay, so that was our data class, or our instance class. Just a pretty simple class. There's a lot of things I can see straight away we could do to improve it, but I don't want to throw too much in there straight away. Let's have a look at our GUI class. This is our GUI class, which is using the linked list class, which is part of Java. Okay, so we've got some GUI components here, a text area, some labels and buttons and text fields for data entry. There's our linked list object, student linked list equals new linked list. So it's a linked list of student emails, which is our data class we just looked at. So our student email class. That's our instance class or our data class. So we're creating a linked list of those called student linked list. And this is our constructor's creating a GUI. So it's adding IDs and text fields to our panels and adding buttons to a panel and adding those to the user interface. So grid panel's got 2 rows. There it is there. 2 rows and 1 column. So the data input controls are getting added to the first row. The buttons are getting added to the second row, which is flow panel 2. And then we're adding the text area to the center and the grid panel to the south. Okay, so let's have a look at our GUI. And there it is. So there's our data controls. So inputs getting added to the first row and our buttons getting added to the second row. We're just doing a quick recap before we go on. And there's our text area. Okay, so that's where we left it last time. And we've got some methods here to help us work with our linked list. Is the student in the linked list? We can pass through an ID, and that will return true or false depending on whether the student is in the list or not. we've got an add student there, and if the student's already in the linked list, we can't add them twice, so we had that bit of functionality there added. Otherwise, we try and create a student email object based on the inputs, and if that succeeds, then we add them to the linked list, and we display all the students in the linked list, and we reset our input fields. Okay, if this fails, in other words, if this here throws an exception, because we've got exceptions being thrown in here, if there's any bad data, throw new student email exception, throw new student email exception. Okay, then the catch block here will handle them. And it's just basically going to display an error message that's returned. So it'll be that error message here that's returned. Error ID cannot be blank, or error name cannot be blank. Okay, so that's a nice way to handle the errors. The student email class, this instance class, knows about the data, but it doesn't know how to display any error messages. It doesn't know whether we're running in a GUI or a console app or a web app. It doesn't know how to display the error messages. So all it can do is throw them back to the using interface, which is our GUI over here, and it knows about how to display the error messages, and it knows it needs a dialog. Okay, so the beauty of doing it this way, where we're just throwing errors here, we're just throwing the errors, is that the GUI application, or whatever application is using this data class, it can handle the errors and display them. Okay, then we're going to delete student down here. If the linked list is empty, we display nothing in the database. If the contents of the ID field is not in the linked list, if his student linked list returns false, then we can display an error. Otherwise, we can loop through, and any students we find with that ID, we can remove them. So student linked list.remove that particular index as we're looping through. If we find a match of that student ID, we can remove them. Then display them all and enter their name and ID text fields. Reset those fields again. Okay, and then display all just loops through and displays all students to the text area. So we're doing an append for the text area. Get that student's details, so it's calling the toString method automatically. So we're calling this method here, which returns the ID plus the name plus the student email, separated by tabs. This is going to append all the students onto the text area, and then we're going to exit application and a little main method just to create things, create our main our GUI application, setting the size and the location and so on. Okay, now there is one thing I'd like to do to this to start off with. I'd like to add a little, looks funny not having a name and a version number in the title here, so let's do that for a first thing. We'll add a name and a version number. So let's go up here to this is our GUI constructor, and we can put this code anywhere inside this code here, inside this method. I'll put it at the end here, but we can put it anywhere. Set title to student linked list, and this is now going to be version 0.02. Okay, because version 1.01 was the last video. We're now working on version 2. So with that little change, let's look at our title's now got the student linked list version 0.02. That looks much better to me. Okay, so with the delete, let's do some ads first. So we'll do ads. So S123, Moose, click the ad, S111, and that'll be Frankie, click the ad. When we wanted to delete a student, we type their student ID in here and click the delete button. Okay, and no ID found. If I entered S111 and click delete, Frankie would be deleted. Okay, so we'll add an edit button in and we'll make it work the same way. Okay, so we'll click the edit button and we'll type in an ID, and we'll look up the user's name. If the ID exists in the linked list, we'll get their name and put it here, and the user can change any of those things and then click a save button or a preserve button or something. Okay, and that will save it back to the linked list. So let's do that. Okay, so we'll add an edit button, and we'll have to add some way to let the user know, or let the user say when they're finished editing and they want to save the changes. Okay, so we can use one button for that if you like, and so we'll add an edit button, and that could be a dual purpose button. And let's make it a dual purpose. We'll do a dual purpose button for now. Edit. Okay, so we've created a new button called Edit. Let's go with the label on the screen. Let's add that to the user interface. We add it to the panel. Add, delete, display, all. I might add it between the add and the edit. Okay, add, edit, and delete seems to work well. Okay, so there's our edit button. And we want a method that runs automatically when they click the edit button. So I'll add that down here. Dot add action listener. And we'll say edit student. Okay, make it a bit clear. We've got add student and edit student now. So now whenever the edit button is clicked, this edit student method will run. Okay, a brand new method. We haven't done it yet, so let's add the code in for that. Okay, so down here we'll add it down the bottom just before our main. Private method, keep your code private unless there's good reason for it to be public. Private void edit student. Okay, and the first thing we wanted to happen is that we look up the student and see if they're there. So is this linked list empty? Does the student exist in a linked list? We want that to be true. So if it returns false, we want to have that error. So it's very similar code to this so far. And then down here, when we find a match, we won't remove them. We're going to populate the GUI controls with the values for that student. Okay, so let's do that. So we're going to copy this code. Okay, we'll copy it all. Okay, we're not going to use it all, but we're just copying delete student at the moment. And we're going to paste that into the edit method because it's very similar code to what we need down here. Okay, so this is the edit student method. If the linked list is empty, display an error. If the ID is not in the linked list, display an error. And down here we want to find that student. Okay, so if the current ID is equal to the one in the linked list, or is equal to the one in the ID text field. So if that's 0, they're the same. So we've found the student. So let's set up a little int index is equal to -1. Okay, so index is -1. If we find a match, we'll set index equal to s, the current value of s. Okay, so we're not going to remove the student now. We're just going to keep track of where that student was in the linked list. And we probably want to stop searching at that stage. We found the match. Let's exit the loop. And the easy way to do that is to say s is equal to this. Okay, and that means exit loop. So we're making it so the loop can't exit anymore. S is equal to the size of the linked list, which means our loop is no longer going to loop anymore. So at the end of this, as soon as we find a match, we're going to set index equal to whatever the value of s was, and exit the loop. No more looping. Okay, so if that student ID is in the list multiple times, which should be an error, but if it's in a linked list multiple times, we'll just find the very first one. Okay, so if index is equal or is greater than or equal to 0, or actually let's say less than 0, we want to display an error. Okay, and we'll write that code shortly. Otherwise, if the index is greater than or equal to 0, then we've found a match and we want to set up the GUI controls to contain that student's details. Okay, so name text field, grab those two bits of code here. Name text field dot set, we'll do a set text to the value that's for that location of that student. So it'll be student linked list dot get index dot get, is it name? Let's see what the method says. It's been a long time since I wrote these. Yeah, get name, there it is. Okay, and the same sort of thing for our ID as well. Okay, so it's going to be dot get ID. Let me just check the name of that. Get ID. Get ID. Yep. It's often good to just copy and paste them, then you can't go wrong. Yep, that's right. Okay, so as soon as we find a match, we're going to have the name go into the name text field and the ID go into the ID text field. Okay. Okay, so let's see that in action. Control 1. We'll take out this code for now. In fact, we'll just chop it. We don't need this code down here anymore. Okay, so we're just ending there. We're still going to display an error. Let's add that in as well, and that'll be, well, we don't really need to worry about if s is less than or equal to 0, if index is less than 0, because there's got to be a match. We've already checked if that student ID is in the database, is in a linked list already. Okay, so we don't need to really worry about that. We can assume that it's in the database down here because we've already checked if it's in the database up here in the linked list. Okay, so we don't need to worry about doing these extra checks down here. We can just do that if we like. It does look strange though, and I would want to do that. Looks really strange to me, so I would want to say if index is greater than or equal to 0, just to be really clear that there's a match. Okay, I'll say here, I'll put a little comment in here. Index cannot be less than 0 because we checked if the student ID was in the linked list before we looped. Okay, so we've already checked if they're in the linked list, so they've got to be there. But this is just for safety. This is just for extra precautions, just in case something bizarre happened. But you really don't need that if statement there. So let's add a linked list. Let's add a student now into our linked list, and we should be able to edit them. Now, one thing that does come in useful here as well, to save you entering data over and over again, let's add a little test data button to add some test data. Okay, so I'm entering the same data over and over again and testing it. Let's add a little test data button in. So we'll add it up here. I'll create a new button called test data button. Test data button. And that's going to have a label of test data. Okay. And let's add that to our user interface, and I'll add it as the very first button in that flow to panel. So flow to panel.add test data button. So it's the very first button in there. And we're going to add an action listener to it. And it's going to be add test data. That should be uppercase T. So when the test data button is clicked, it's going to run a method called add test data. Okay, so let's do that. Write a little bit of code. We can do it anywhere we like. I'll do it down the bottom, so it's all the new stuff's down the bottom. Near the bottom. Private void add test data. And what we want to do is say we want to run this method. We want to invoke the code we've already written. So we need to populate the name text field and the ID text field, and then click the add button. I'm going to do that with code. Okay, so let's do that. So I'll grab that bit of code from up above, and I'll paste it down here in our add test data button. Okay, so we want to say name text field dot set text to Moose. This is a good thing to do when you're writing apps too, is to add a test data button so that you can add a bunch of test data. It just saves you entering it all every time you do a run and a test run. ID text field is S123. So that's some data from Moose, and we want to click the add button, which is just running our add method. And we're not going to check the results because we know our data is valid. We know our test data is valid. And same for Frankie. And he's S111. And add student. I might do another one as well. And that'll be Bella. And she's S789. And we'll go add student. Okay, so put the details for a student in the data entry boxes. Call the add student method, which is simulating clicking the add button. Do the same for Frankie's details and the same for Bella. Okay, just saves us setting up the test data every time we do a run. Okay, let's save that. And Control 1, Control 2, test data. And there's our test data, nicely appearing. Okay, display all that's there. It's there inside our linked list. Okay, so we've got three items. It saves us doing it each time. Just gives us a starting point. Okay. So that's a little test starter button. Very useful thing to do when you're developing apps is add a little test starter button. You can comment it out and delete the code later if you want to. Okay, now that we've done the test starter button, it just means it's a bit quicker now for testing and doing the stuff we need to do. So let's run it again. Control 1, Control 2, and we'll do the test starter button. And I'll type in S123 and click the edit button. And now our code will, let's just remind ourselves, our code will check if the linked list is empty. I'll display an error, it's not empty. It'll check if that student ID is in the linked list, and if it's false, it'll display an error. Otherwise, it'll come down here and loop and find the student ID and populate the name text field with the name of the student. And the ID should already be there, so we shouldn't need to do the second one. We shouldn't need to do that one at all. The ID should already be there, so we just need the name. Okay, so we'll just do Control 1 again, compile and run, and we'll do test starter, and then I'll go S123 and click edit, and Moose should appear there. Okay, edit, and there's Moose. Okay, let's do an S111 and click edit, and Frankie's appearing there. Okay, so we're looking up the data out of the linked list, and we're using the data out of the linked list to populate the GUI fields again. When we do an add, we get the data from the fields, input fields, and add an item into the linked list. When we're doing an edit, we're searching through the linked list to find a match, and then grabbing the details out of the linked list and putting them back in the GUI controls. Okay, let's just do 789 for Bella. 789. Edit, and we've got Bella there, and let's do a 999, which doesn't exist, and we should get an error message. An error, the student ID is not in the database. Here's something I might fix as well while we're at it. Okay, so normally when you're working with a GUI app, the error messages should appear inside there like that, so they're really obvious. Because this app here could be running on, you might have a multi-screen setup, 3 screens or 4 screens, and this could be running way over on one of the screens here. And it's no good if the dialogues are appearing in the middle of your primary monitor, because you might not notice them, and you'll be clicking on the app here thinking it's locked up when there's a dialogue waiting for you back 3 monitors away. Okay, so let's make it so that our dialogues always appear centered in our GUI. Let's do that. It's a very simple change. We might as well do it. Okay, so we get our class name, our GUI class name, and scroll down to our error dialogues and replace null with our GUI class name .this. Okay, so all I did was replace the null with student email GUI .this. Let's do that for each one, each of our GUI, each one of our error messages. Okay, there it is. I replaced null with that. There's another one here. I'll wrap the messages onto the next line so you can read them easier. Replace the null with student email GUI.this. Down here again. And again. And that takes care of them all. No more nulls. Yep. Okay, so now when we get an error, it appears in the middle of the GUI. Okay, which is the way it should be. So just that simple change makes things a lot more usable. Okay, so that's another change we've done for this video. Okay, now there's one other thing I'd like to talk about here when a user clicks the edit button. So let's do our test data again. And there's our data. If they type in S111, Frankie should appear here. Okay, and he does. Now we don't want the user doing adds or edits or deletes or display alls. They're halfway through an edit process here. So what we want to do is make it so that all these other buttons are disabled and it's just this one here enabled. And they need to click edit again to save their changes. In fact, we might even rename the button to say save changes or save. Okay. So we'll disable all the other buttons if they're in edit mode, and we'll change that button label so it says something else. Okay, it's still the edit button behind the scenes, but we'll change the label just so it's clear that the user needs to click it to save their changes. Okay. So down here in the edit student, let's grab all the buttons. There's all the buttons there. We're in the edit method down here. We know index is greater than or equal to 0, so let's disable all the other buttons. Test data button dot set to false, and get rid of the panel at the front. And just do that for each button. Add button, set enable to false. And delete button, set enable to false. Display all button, set enable to false. Exit button, set enable to false. Okay, I've just got to line everything up. I've got issues with neat code. Okay, that's all our buttons. And we want to rename this edit button so that it says something else. Or maybe we'll add another button in. Let's see how this looks first. Okay, let's see how this looks. So now when I click the edit button and we find a match, we're disabling all the buttons but the edit button. Let's see how that works. Test data, S111, click edit, and all the other buttons are disabled. So the user's in edit mode. We don't want them leaving edit mode until either they want to cancel the changes or they want to save them. Okay, but we don't want to let the user do anything else until they finish editing the data. Okay, so how would we make that work? We might add another button. I might add another button just for simplicity so you can see them turn on and off. And I'll add another button called keep, or keep changes or whatever. Okay. So let's do that. I could reuse the edit button if you wanted to, but I might also just add another button. Just makes it a little bit clearer what I'm doing so you can see them in action. And this is edit save. I'll call it edit save. And I'll call it save there. So you're saving the changes that you've made. So we've got two edit buttons now. One's the edit and one's the edit save. Let's add the edit save to our user interface. So it's going to be after the edit button. Okay, so edit save, there it is. And when the user clicks the edit save button, oops, I'll do it after the edit save button. We'll go edit save student. Okay, so we're going to run a method called edit save student when they click edit save. Okay, so edit save student, we need to write that code now. So we'll do it down here with our edit method again. So there's the edit student method, and then we want an edit save method. Private void edit save. So this code will preserve so the student know we're editing. So if they change the student ID or the name, it will preserve those changes and save them back into the linked list. Okay. So what we need to do then is keep track. We need this index now. We need this down here because that was the position of that student in the linked list. So this can't be method data now anymore. It can't be local to the method. It's got to be class data. And to make it really clear what the index is, I'll make it index. I'll call it edit index to make it really clear. Okay, edit index, and edit index, and same down there, edit index, and it must update comment one as well. It's commented out, but I'll update that as well. Okay, so edit index. Okay, so here's the important part. We don't want to declare edit index here because we need it in this method, and we also need it in this method. Okay, so we need the edit index down here as well. So we need to make this so it's class data, not method data. So it's got class scope, not method scope. Okay, so we need to Control C on that and take out the int at the front. So we're setting it to -1, we're not declaring it. Very important you make that change. Take out the int at the front there. So we're just initializing or setting class data to a value here and using class data. Index, edit index is now class data. Let's go back up to the top, up to our class level. Okay, and we'll pop it in there. Private int edit index. Okay, so that's now class data. Okay, so we declare the integer up here because we're using it in multiple methods, this index. Okay, just like we did with student linked list, we're using that in multiple methods, so we had to declare that at class level as well. Okay, so make sure you've taken off that int down here in the edit. Make sure you've taken off that int there, declaring it inside the method here, because otherwise there'll be two copies, and Java will work with the local copy here, and when you get down to this method here, it won't be set to the right value. Okay, so make sure you take off the int there. Okay, so what we can do is, so if they click this, if they click the edit save button or the save button, then we're saving data back in a linked list. Okay. So what we're going to do is get our linked list, and we want to set the name. Okay, so we're getting the student at that item, at that location in the linked list. That gives us our student, and we want to set their name to the value that's in the GUI components. Okay, so it'll be so we're setting their name to that name text field. Name text field got get text. Okay, so just to recap quickly, so we're using the edit index that we set up above here in the prior method. So we're getting the student at that location in the linked list, and we're setting their name to the current contents of the GUI component, which is the name text field. The ID might have changed as well. So let's do their let's do their ID. And it's ID text field, and it's set ID. Okay, so we're setting the name, setting their name to whatever's in the text field, and setting their ID to whatever's in the ID text field. Okay, so we're calling the mutator methods there. We're going to have a little bit of tidying up to do. So down here, by default, we want the edit save button to be disabled. So in our constructor, let's make it disabled. Anywhere in here is fine. Edit save button dot set enabled to false. Okay, setting it to enabled is false. So we're disabling the edit save button in our constructor. So it's not available yet. It's not available until the user clicks the edit button. Okay, so we'll make it disabled by default in our constructor. And then we scroll down to our edit method. And in the edit method here, we'll make it so that it's enabled if we find a valid index. Okay, so down here, we'll make the edit save button enabled. True, make it enabled. Okay, and then probably want to make the edit button disabled here as well. In other words, you can't leave until you've clicked the save button. Back to false. Okay, so edit save set to true, set to valid, set to enabled, but the edit button is disabled. Okay, so let's see that in action. Let's see what happens. Okay, test data, S111, click the edit button, and see the save button's now enabled. Everything else is disabled. Okay, so what do we want to change Frankie to? Let's change it to Sam. Okay, and click the save button. Oh, nothing changed. Okay, nothing changed here because we're going to call the display all method again. Okay, so display all method, after you finish doing an edit, down here with the edit save, you've got to remember to call display all again. Okay, let's compile and run. Okay, test data, click S111, we'll edit Frankie. Okay, Frankie's there, the save button's enabled. Let's change his name to Sam, so he's no longer Frankie, and click Save. And you'll see it's changed to Sam up there. Okay, we should probably reset these input fields as well, because they're no longer being used for editing. The editing's finished, and we should disable this button, but re-enable all the other ones maybe. Okay, so let's do that. So we've got to clear our inputs and also disable that button and re-enable the other ones. Okay, so just to recap, when the edit's finished, we're setting updating the details in the linked list, displaying them, and we want to disable that button now, the edit save button. So let's go grab that. That's that one there. Set the default so it's no longer enabled, and we'll re-enable all these buttons.
Enjoy your stay. Okay, that's done. I'm going to get back.
So we'll re-enable the edit and test data. I don't know if we want to re-enable it again. Anyway, we'll do it for now. Add, we'll re-enable, delete, display all, and exit. So we're re-enabling all the buttons that we want and disabling the buttons we don't want enabled anymore. And the other thing we want to do is clear the text fields. So name text field, dot set text to blank, and ID text field set text to blank. So erase the input fields because we've updated the student in the linked list, and set the buttons back how we want them. That's basically what we did. Control 1, Control 2. Let's have a test data. And we'll go S999 and we'll click edit, and they're not in a database. Good. Let's do a test of 789. Edit, and there's the details. So it's Bella, S89, and all the buttons are disabled. Let's change her name to Scylla. Her name's Scylla, and we'll change your ID to 655. Okay, 655, and we'll click the save button, and her details up here should change. So it should be S655 and Scylla, and S55 at my.email. Click the save button, and there it's changed. And our input fields are reset, and our buttons are back how we had them. Okay, let's do another edit. So we'll type in nothing, click edit. Students are not in the database because they're blank. S123, oops, S123, we'll click edit. We're editing Moose this time, and we'll change his name to Maximus, and his ID is now 999, and we'll click save, and Moose's details should change up here. So it should be S999 and Maximus. Click save, and that's happened. Okay, so that's our edit working nicely. It's a little bit clunky, but that's good enough for this little project. It's only a little demo project. So I hope the video was useful. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day. If there's any questions, like I said, if there's any questions, let me know in the comments. If there's anything you haven't understood, let me know in the comments. If there's anything you haven't liked, don't click the dislike button. Let me know in the comments and give me a chance to put it right and fix it. Okay, thanks for watching. Have a nice day.